All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Thank you all for being here. Wow, wow, wow. I know we're a little late, and the reason for that is that we reconfigured the studio. And in reconfiguring the studio, we had a camera issue. And so because of that, we are in a situation where we're scrambling at the very last moment to address the camera issue, which was not the original issue. You can see we have all our merch on perfect display here. That was sort of our goal wasn't to display the merch, but it does have a magical quality, though, when you see the merch. All of these things are available for purchase at getmarkmerch.com. How dare you tell me to turn it down? How dare you? God, I am just so...
Why are you yelling?
I have so much pent-up rage, really. That's what's... there it is, getmarkmerch.com. Tony, are the levels okay for you? We've reconfigured the whole studio, so all levels may be... Tony may be also...
I trimmed you a little bit. You sound good. It just that sound effect was a bit hot. I just heard a little distortion.
Off of the...
Thanks, Tony.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much.
You were fine. Just the sound effects.
All right. The truth is that Kim handled things so beautifully while I was away. Thank you, Kim. I've already acknowledged you. I believe I acknowledged you last week, but I wanted to re-acknowledge you, if that's a word. And thank you, Tony, for the help, as Albert has been away, and he is on an exotic vacation through Spain. We are excited to be here. It is convention week, and who doesn't love a convention? Am I right, people? All the buttons and the bumper stickers and the hats and the speeches and the music and the magic. So we'll discuss that. Joe Biden, Uncle Joe, is on tonight. He is, the redo looks good, says Vicky. Thank you, Vicky. I appreciate that. They've redone a bunch of stuff that you can't see. And I mention this only because I'm having to get used to all of that. And so if I seem a little tentative or I'm looking down a lot, it's because I don't know where anything is anymore. But TMTS Studios, where the magic happens, thanks Team Luis, with a big shout out, and that is a super chat for a couple of bucks. By the way, let me just mention this. I've got a couple of things to get to. Preamble. Before I do, I want to mention that Gary Dietrich, the political ninja, will join us bottom of the hour. We'll talk about the convention. It strikes me that these conventions, and by now you've heard it from the world of punditry, etc., these conventions mean nothing on some level. They are advertisements for the party and the personalities in the party. In this case, Kamala Harris is a pretty big deal. I mean, in the sense that she's the storybook quality of her rise is quite extraordinary. By the way, I was an early adopter. There she is, DNC 2024, her and Tim Walz. It takes a great candidate to agree to put that back up there again. I wanted to make a point because the picture of Tim Walz is bigger than that of Kamala Harris.
What?
I know, and you don't think that Donald Trump would ever let JD Vance's picture be bigger than his own. You know, I mean, that would never happen. So, major props to Kamala Harris for not being so jacked up on herself that she can't let Walz be bigger in the picture, or let me suggest as an alternative, she didn't see the picture and so she's not aware of it. Yes, I think that's probably, yeah.
Do you know that she's little? She's a very small woman in stature. She's like 5'1", and you wouldn't see her, on the podium or whatever on the stage and think that, because she wears these pants and heels that make her legs look longer. But she
reps a bigger profile.
She's very short, so maybe it's just that she's a little person.
Well, in the picture, you can make her as big as you are.
I'm just saying.
It's a picture, Kim. Please,
but
I mean, you can make her as big as
representative of them standing together.
Well, it's not
This would be-
representative of
would be the
them
case.
standing. All right, maybe you're right. I don't know. You know where she's really? I was an early adopter on the Kamala Harris finger puppet. I will not take a backseat to anyone. There is no other show. You can go all over YouTube. You can go all over the web. No other show played the Kamala Harris finger puppet up.
It's true.
In a big, big way when she was just a vice president, nothing more. I played the Kamala Harris finger puppet up front. Now, if you want to buy this finger puppet, it costs you big money. I got in cheap. Now it's,
Is that
you know
true?
what? I might actually part with our Mark Thompson show, Kamala Harris finger puppet, but
I don't think, no. You're going to try to auction that off or give it away. I don't think you should. It's part of the collection. You can't break it up.
I'm just saying, make an offer. Make an offer.
She belongs there with Lincoln and
Yes,
Twain and whoever
Lincoln
else.
and
you've got.
Angry Beethoven.
There you have it.
Yes. I like the new camera angle, says Trevor Starr in Hollywood. 10-10 with the super chat. Nice composition, which is a 10 out of 10. And there is the
Big shout out.
Big shout out to Trevor in Hollywood, who did send me a ton of Trump drops and other drops as well. But it was incredible. I'll tell you how many drops he sent me. 68. 68 drops. And I was going through the drops, and we're redoing the studio. And so there's a lot of stuff here that's not quite settled. This cake is not quite baked. But this is the primordial ooze of what will come together as something special. Can we get an update on Tony's ducks, says Sandy. And Tony,
Big shout out.
I thank you, Sandy, for the question. Tony, can we get an update on your ducks?
I've been to the park. There are ducks there. I can't prove which one is which. One does seem to give me a slight side eye, which maybe that's the one.
Yeah. I mean, there is, yeah.
I don't know.
That's the
There are
guy
ducks there. Yeah.
who moved us in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
That was very inappropriate.
It was really, there are two schools of thought on it. And,
I know.
but anyway, Tony, thank you for the question about it. Love the show. I'm becoming a what does that say? Marco Condiac?
Yeah, Marco Condiac.
What does that mean?
Like a hypochondriac, but a Marco Condiac.
I see.
Someone who must see the show all the time.
I see. Well, then big shout out, Harry Maggie.
shout
He's
out.
a very consistent supporter, and thank you.
Yeah.
Tony is so cute, says Sheila. Wow, is that right? Man.
Hubba hubba. Wow.
Man, there might be a. I'd
Look
love
at he's
to.
blushing. He's so cute.
I'd love to see Tony connect with Sheila. And Sheila's True Crime Chat reminds me that we do have True Crime Corner on Mondays. It will be at the bottom of the second hour of the show. This is the first hour. If you're just joining us, we jumped on a little late because the studio configuration being redone. We're hoping, and there's still some bugs to work out, so please be kind. As Gordon says, thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, so the convention is, what I was about to say is that
The Mark Thompson Show.
yeah, what I was about to say simply was the convention is an advertisement, obviously, of the party, the personalities in the party. You've heard this from the world of punditry, et cetera. The only point I would make is that there are a couple of things going on here. We'll talk to Gary Dietrich about it bottom of the hour, but I think the fact that Biden is sort of buried on night one is, I think it's deliberate, and I think it may be smart. You know, the whole way that Harris is both riding, and let's face it, I mean, she received the nomination, I'd suggest, and is getting the nomination formally, of course, during the convention week, but is riding as sort of the way she rode shotgun to Joe Biden. I mean, it helped her enormously politically. So my point in mentioning it is she's linked to him, but obviously you want to individuate from him because he's not the most popular. Individuate would be a ding word. The idea somehow that you can both benefit from, but also pay a price for your association with Joe Biden is, I think, an important concept. And so back to tonight, you've got Joe Biden going on late. I mean, it's 40 when he goes on, something like that, Kim? Or
He
10.
doesn't do well late.
Well, it doesn't matter how he does because he's not relevant anymore to the presidential race on one level. I think he can, get a nap, jack himself up with coffee or whatever. I think he can be okay. And hammer home that which he's done during this administration. This administration does have accomplishments. I mean, surprisingly terrific accomplishments when you look at the infrastructure plan and you look at the negotiation now on drug prices, these things that are the result of hard-fought victories. So it's not as though Joe Biden doesn't have some good brags along the way here. The point I was trying to make, and we'll talk to Dietrich about it as well, is that Harris is having to play this balance of being Joe Biden's right-hand person and also somehow not that involved in policies that might be politically costly. So that's where we are on that. And I think apart from that, conventions are forgotten. You'll get your bump from the convention, obviously, but I don't see any real change substantively. Now, there are two other wild cards. One of them is the protests, the Gaza protests that will go on outside. They could steal enough media attention to be significant and, if you will, dirty up the media coverage around the convention. And the other is simply if there is a huge misstep of some kind. If there's a huge breaking news misstep of some kind, obviously that changes the arithmetic. Otherwise, it's kind of a pro forma thing. There is the protest. There will be a lot of it. I'd look for a lot of that. The whole deal with, well, the cops in Chicago in 1968, hey, dude, that was a long time ago, 1968. The cops in Chicago have a feel for how to handle this situation now. I think there'll be a far different strategy when it comes to handling these Palestinian protesters or those who are protesting about Gaza. I just don't. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to be a big story. I just don't think it's going to be like 1968. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. So I want to talk about a couple of things that Harris has proposed economically. I love that she took a lot of grief for going after price gouging and price fixing. She went after the price gouging and she suggested price fixing. I will talk about that a little bit later in the show because that actually I thought was politically quite terrific. What you're hearing is, oh, how could anybody suggest price fixing? It's such a, oh my God, it's a, well, it's a thing that we already do. So when you talk about economic naivete or whatever, actually, I'll give you an example, a big one. The Fed. What does the Fed do with interest rates? Fixes them, okay? That is the federal government involved in price fixing. Nobody gives them the side eye. You find it in any number of businesses, and you find it with utilities. There is a limit. That is why the utilities have to petition the state of California for rate increases. Why? Because those prices are fixed. So this idea somehow that, oh my God, this is socialist, communism, BS, man. That is just a talking point. I'll speak to even more specifics than that because she's right about the collusive nature of some of these industries. Plus, I like politically the idea that corporate M&A, which is out of control, that has limited the ability of businesses to compete. It has limited the ability of consumers to get good deals. I love that that's become something that she's called out. Now, again, the right is always going to tell you what's she doing. She's trying to limit free enterprise. No, she's going after big corporations. And breaking news, big corporations aren't popular. So from a political standpoint, and as I've just mentioned, from a practical standpoint, I think her positions hold water. And the other last thing I will say before you say it is, what positions? She hasn't taken any specific positions. Exactly. And I love that. Because all they're going to do is try to nail you on specific strategies. If you lay out positions that are a bunch of X's and O's, no one reads it. The public doesn't care. And you end up with the punditry verse going after you on some X or O that they disagree with your economic positions. So, to review, I like what she's done. I'll speak to it in greater detail. I like that she's broad-stroked it because I think the audience she's playing to, the voter goes, yeah, I'm paying too much for fill in the blank. And then I like the fact that she hasn't gotten into a lot of specifics because I don't think it's important yet. And lastly, but it was firstly when I presented it, this isn't something unprecedented in this country, what she's suggesting. So we can just let go of that. So this is, and I knew I would get this. And, actually, if you asked me to bet $10,000 on who I would get this from, I would have bet you're going to get this from Randy, the guy who's regular. You're right. He's just looking at, that's right, Mark. Here. And let me just do, because I like to mock people who disagree with me. Sorry. Sure, Mark, let's just have the government involved in setting prices in the grocery store. No, actually, that's not what I'm saying, Randy. But that is the world of right-wing punditry getting a hold of her basic, general point that she was making about big grocery, about the collusive nature of a lot of this grocery store pricing. Right. She was making an important point about that, and I actually agree with it. And it's taking it and it's perverting it. So that's not what she said, Randy. You know it's not what she said. And I want you to apologize to me right now, Randy, or Kim is going to yellow card you. How's that?
Oh, wow.
It's a new week, and I will be yellow carding, I think, far more liberally.
I have a question. You've heard people say, oh, the economy under Biden-Harris is awful. Prices are costing, at the grocery store, it's so much more expensive, which is true. Then the other day, you have Trump come out and beside him are tables full of grocery store items. So what is it? Can the president affect prices at the grocery store or not? I mean, how do you fix it? You have the president calling up Kraft mayonnaise and saying, hey, you're too expensive. You got to lower your prices. Or does the president not have control over these things? What is it?
Well, I love the idea of the president calling Kraft mayonnaise, first of all. I think that's a great, it would be a great moment. I mean,
listen, Chips Ahoy, your
never been
cookies are too
anything like
expensive.
this.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't know.
I had your cookies and cream ice cream over the weekend, and it was too expensive.
Right.
And by the way, not enough cookies, too much cream.
Does the government have to call every manufacturer, every single manufacturer in the store and say, listen, lower your prices, pal?
This is, again, you have to go back to the cause of this. The cause of grocery prices, because you've asked about that. Yeah. The cause of grocery prices being so high started during the supply chain interruption. Mm-hmm. It was sort of enabled by COVID. And when I say enabled, I'm using the word specifically because it really was something that they took advantage of. It was enabled by COVID, again, justified a bit by the interruption in the supply chain. But what has happened? It's the rocket feather thing that they talk about in economics. The rocket of prices up and the feathering of them floating down. In other words, they go up a lot faster than they are heading down. And that's what's happened now. The prices haven't lowered. That's what we're talking about. So when you talk about lowering prices, you talk about competition. And we're not getting competition because it's a real thing. The mergers of Kroger's, and you know that, Kim, you know the names of these companies in big grocery, it really is a thing. So I'd suggest to you that what is the root cause of these prices being so high? In some measure, it is, if not a literal collusive agreement, it's that there are so few stores and so few businesses and business entities associated with the grocery world and that supply chain that they are able to, if not manipulate prices, they are able to maintain prices at much higher levels than probably supply and demand would necessitate.
Once the price goes up, they're not putting it back down. They get used to that money, and then they want it.
It does happen. By the way, I thought of you, Delwood Kelp. I know that's not your real name, but I do love that fake name. Host is all in from this point forward, even knocking the Washington Post slam on Kamala's hand. Thank you for mentioning that, Delwood, because I'll tell you what, that Washington Post slam, and I will address this later, on Kamala's plan, which is not really a plan, it was a broad stroke, as I mentioned before, was total BS. Yes, I'm against the Washington Post. Is that so effing awful? I mean, drag me out at sunrise for doing something was that not the typical lib thing to do, to go away against the Washington Post? I read the Washington Post economic breakdown. It was a hack breakdown by a hack economist on Kamala's plan. So yeah, I'm not all in for Kamala Harris. I told you I wasn't even a huge fan of Kamala Harris. Now, damn straight I'm all. What do you? What's the alternative? Your guy? We drag him off the golf course once in a while so that he can take out an Iranian leader or whatever you want to do, or so he can put in tariffs on his economic plan. Was he put tariffs on China? He's talking about more tariffs, another tax cut. What does your guy want to do, Delwood Kelp? I'm telling you, he shouldn't be allowed into the White House on a tour. I will take a meeting on many GOP minds and leaders, but not the guy who they're running. So you're right. When you say I'm all in from this point forward, I am on her economic plan. There's no plan, really. She's called out price gouging, which is real. Now, there are and on the Washington Post, yeah, it was a BS piece from a hack economist. Period. Full stop, Delwood. So take that. And don't get on my case today, because I'll yellow card you.
Wow. Why are you yelling?
Why are you yelling?
The last thing I will say, and I've forgotten the last thing I was going to say because I was so angry at Delwood. I'm going to make room for Kim. I know what the last thing I wanted to say on this economics thing was. It related to price gouging. There are already plenty of laws against price gouging. You know this. Typically, they relate to emergency increases in prices. When there's gouging in an emergency, we know this in California, right? They'll jack up the price of water. They'll jack up the price of fuel. These are things that are literally against the law. They're already on the books. Now, what we're talking about with price gouging in other areas is really this is where it all washes together, and I'll be happy to address this later in the show. We're talking about price fixing, collusive agreements. These are things that jack up prices. It's not gouging per se, but it falls into that category, and I like the fact that she used the word gouging, because the average person, all of us go, yeah, I'm just pissed off about having to pay so much money for fill in the blank, cookies and cream, ice cream, mayonnaise, whatever it is. So all I'm saying is there are laws on the books already for gouging, but the word gouging might actually be a decent word to use, because I think it resonates and lands with a lot of the American public who feel that, hey, I'm paying too much money for everything in the stores. All right. I've said a lot, but of course, as usual, what I've said is very, very important.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah,
I'm kind of a big deal.
Well, I'm just making a point. So, look, I've got a big...
The Mark Thompson Show.
I've got a big name here. They just redid my studio. I don't know where anything is. So I'm excited. Michael said, Mark, put the coffee down. Mm-hmm. Right. I still want to get you through a lot of the drops I got. I got so many drops from our magical Trevor. And Teacher Lori, you sent me drops, and I know you seem annoyed that I didn't use them. The reason I haven't used them yet, here it is. Teacher Lori says, Mark has still not used any of my 3 audio files. I sent them right after the Tim Waltz pick. Because they didn't, from an audio standpoint, they just weren't quite clean enough for us. That's the only reason. I love that you sent them, and I'm sorry that we didn't use them. Trevor, I think, may, EQ it differently in the way he loads it in. So, sorry, I didn't mean it. It's nothing personal. I love the stuff that you sent. But, again, that's the reason we didn't use it. So,
and a lot of people like him. I think they like me, too.
Yeah.
I was having lunch with people that if I told you who they were, you wouldn't even believe it.
You know, people make donuts and they make lots of things. It's all about the oil.
Yeah. All right. So I'll share more of those with you as we...
They're all horrible. These are horrible human beings.
Yeah, we'll get to more of that as we go. Kim, can I get to Gary Dietrich next?
Please.
All right, so good stuff. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you for smashing the like button and being part of this show. We appreciate you sharing the show, helping us grow. I very much appreciate everybody who makes it here. If you want to support the show, you can visit themarkthompsonshow.com, click the Patreon or PayPal links, and you can contribute to the life of this show. We're really an NPR PBS model. So you, the viewers and listeners, are our sponsors. Themarkthompsonshow.com. Click Patreon or PayPal links, and you can contribute. And of course, those Patreon and PayPal links are under every video as well. I will give you more about our meetup, which is coming up, but right now I don't want to delay any further. This guy, longtime KGO political expert, now has soared, having left KGO as the CBS television contributor and political analyst. He's also the analyst at iHeart Radio. I just look at Gary Dietrich's body of work, and it's immense and so very impressive. And I'm a bit humbled and really honored that he joins us on Mondays to review what's going on. How about it for Gary Dietrich, everybody? Sir,
hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm well. I was just reflecting on the week ahead, which is, again, there's some predictable things about conventions, but I'm wondering if you might be able to put your finger on a couple things that are a little less predictable about this convention.
Well, I'll say, Mark, there's a couple things that stand out about this convention that have nothing to do with the proceedings themselves. Okay, one does, one doesn't. Let's start with the obvious, the one that doesn't. How many tens of thousands of people are going to be showing up outside that convention hall, and what kind of noise are they going to make that's going to reverberate, particularly and importantly, as you know, Mark, on the national media and the international media? That is really going to be the backstory of this next 4 days. You know, they say, that is the organizers, that they took a step back when Biden stepped aside and Kamala, took the reins and said, well, should we tone things down for Chicago? They said that conversation lasted about 30 minutes, and they said, no way. Full speed ahead. We don't believe that as of yet, she has demonstrated substantial departure from the Biden approach to the Israel-Gaza conflict in particular. So away we go. And there's going to be other protesters there as well. I expect we'll see some folks who don't think there's enough being done on climate change and a host of other things. But the big issue, Mark, especially in light of the fact that two huge things are sitting out there in the Middle East. One is, are we going to actually see an agreement, a ceasefire agreement this week? There's been a lot of things out of the White House saying maybe. But over the weekend, some of those hopes were dimmed. And secondly, is the potential for an Iranian attack on Israel. And, that's still sitting out there. So there is so much backstory outside the convention hall. That's number one. The second one, Mark, is the uncommitted delegates. There are about 30 of them, for example, from Michigan and so forth. Are these uncommitted delegates going to use tomorrow, and they're basically calling it kind of a celebratory or commemorative roll call vote, because, of course, the official roll call vote was done online for Kamala Harris, and that's done. That's in the can. But during that process, are there going to be protests? Are there going to be speechifying about this kind of an issue? Yet to be seen.
Let me go back to your first point, and then we can get to the second. But the first point is, I have 2 points about the first point. My first is a question, because it's interesting. The Republicans, there must have been protesters there at their convention. I mean, it's not as though everything they do is without controversy. And yet, I didn't hear a lot about it or see a lot about it.
Well, the difference, Mark, is significant, and it is the following. There were, of course, there's protesters. There's protesters at the state capitol in Sacramento and in D.C. literally every single day, okay? But the difference is this, because the Israel-Gaza protesters represent a continued significant division within Kamala Harris's own party. That is the challenge. The progressive wing that is truly felt that the Biden-Harris administration has not taken this seriously enough. That is the number of deaths, the tens of thousands of Palestinians, the leaning on Israel more heavily, the restrictions on perhaps weaponry to them. There's a significant chunk of the Democratic progressive wing who are not happy still with the approach. And that is the danger, politically speaking, for the Harris-Walz ticket this week.
And the second question I had was, to what extent do you think that will influence dialogue in the hall? You've just said that they've kind of decided that they're not going to change to accommodate, in effect. I'm wondering to what extent you think, and this is not anything you could know, I'm just asking sort of for you've been to so many of these and know much of this stuff. How much of that stuff from outside will spill into inside? And then once it does, how do you handle it in the hall? Like, what would be the appropriate way to handle it and what would be the wrong way to handle it? Right.
Well, remember that, it's two things. One, outside the hall, Mark, this is going to be seen as, okay, demonstrations, protests. The organizers are saying they can have as many as 20,000 there today. That's not an insignificant protest. The question will become a couple things. Are the protesters successful in disrupting the convention anyway? How could they do that? Blocking off streets, all the usual. That would disrupt the flow of delegates, for example, in or out of the hall, or sadly, potentially violence. Now, certainly, nobody hopes that happens. I think the organizers themselves have said this is going to be nonviolent, peaceful, but stuff happens in demonstrations, and sometimes there's people that incite things. So let's hope that doesn't occur. But that's the stuff outside the hall. Inside the hall, Mark, keep in mind that at a number of the Kamala Harris events over the last weeks, there have been protesters inside her events, unfurling banners, yelling. Remember, she had that famous interchange early on in her process over the last couple of weeks where she said, look, I'm speaking now, and that was not seen as favorable by certain members of her party. So inside the hall, yes, there could be things. And apparently security is prepared for these inside and out. We'll see.
Now, on to the other side. While this is going on, there is something, I'll just mention it because we are talking about the other side, but I'll mention it in relation to the DNC because we're touching on that right now. There's something called bracketing that they do. So bracketing is when you do stuff that is a media event, that's the way it's intended to be, and it's usually done at the same time or in the same place or in some way relevant to the convention that's going on. You try to kind of counter-program. It's called political bracketing. So I think JD Vances of the world may be involved in something like that. I don't know if Trump is. It's always a sort of, it's a roll of the dice as to how effective it is, but we can't expect that, right?
Yeah, and it used to be in the good old days, Mark, the good old days of politics, and by that people mean more traditional. The other party went dark during your convention week. I mean, there literally was not a peep out of the other side. That was seen as sort of a sign of mutual respect. And back in the day, it was also thought, and you could understand some of this pre-social media, it was thought, hey, you know what? The networks all have their people and cameras at the event site. They're not going to cover us, right? We could be standing out in a field somewhere and they'll be like, thanks for coming. But now, of course, cameras are ubiquitous. They're on millions and millions of phones. So, counter-programming has become a thing, as we say. In fact, Trump's holding a rally in Pennsylvania today. And I would expect that throughout this week, and the Democrats did the same thing during the Republican convention, I would expect, yes, you would definitely see counter-programming. How much of it's going to be event-based? How much of it's going to be sending surrogates near the DNC or actually putting them in proximity where they can, speak their own minds? How much of it's going to be social media, press release type things? Yet to be seen. But I would certainly expect in our day there will be a constant stream of counter-programming.
Sure. When you say mutual respect, it just seems like such a quaint idea from so long ago.
They're all horrible. These are horrible human beings.
Yeah, right. So the nature of the discourse has definitely changed. All right. And then to the course ahead. I mean, after this convention, there'll be some pluses and minuses, I would think. Biden is speaking tonight. I was making the point that he's speaking kind of, first of all, early in the convention cycle of these several days, and also kind of late at night. I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's prime time, but there's going to be some daylight between Biden and Kamala Harris, it would seem. And managing that daylight is something that this party has to do, right?
Yeah. To me, Mark, the most interesting insider game this week is just that. How do you honor a sitting president who, by all accounts, and all the details are still coming out about how much Nancy Pelosi was involved, how much she said. In fact, there was some interesting reporting yesterday, Mark, that one of the reasons that Pelosi was particularly miffed and wanted Biden out was because this perception that he favored the U.S. Senate over the House. And there's a number of House members who've now gone on record in the last 24, 48 hours saying, yeah, we saw that all the time. We felt like we were sacrificial lambs, that is the Democratic caucus in the House. And that because of Biden's longstanding relationships and affiliation with the U.S. Senate, they got the short end of the stick. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Biden is handled. Certainly, I said this from the very get-go. The minute he announced he was stepping aside, I said, well, Monday night at the convention is his. I said this weeks ago. This will be Joe Biden night. And it will be all about heaping praises on Joe Biden. Joe Biden is expected to speak. Hillary Clinton is going to speak. I mean, there's going to be a lot of accolades for the sitting president. And then it will be, Joe, thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Because I will guarantee
we have a couple of vouchers at Applebee's, and you feel free.
We got some free Happy Meals. We got all kinds. We got a goodie bag for you and Jill. And, we appreciate you coming. I would expect to not see very much of Joe Biden in the next 3 days. And that's intentional, of course. I mean, Harris has to distinguish herself from a sitting president whose approval ratings continue to be very low, whose polling numbers, as you know, Mark, just 30 days ago were abysmal. She has to do that. I mean, she knows that. The Biden people begrudgingly know that and expect that to happen.
I mean, I think Dillette's saying Joe will be a mess late at night. Yikes! No, I mean he'll. It's a speech that's important. He'll be together, I would think. I mean, he's not going to come on, and I think he's not going to come on and be a mess. So I wouldn't. And the idea is, this is also a point being made, they better treat Biden with utmost respect, which he deserves, says Rain. And that's what you're saying, that they'll give everybody their respect, and then they want them to catch the first plane out. To sort of give the new wing of the party, if you will, let them turn the page and sort of suggest that there's a new wing of the party. It is interesting, too, I was making this point a little bit ago, that she both can benefit from and then pay a price for her association with Biden, can Kamala Harris, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the biggest challenge right now. And the last one of these tickets that we saw this challenge happen extensively, I think, Mark, you and I maybe touched on this last week, was Bill Clinton and Al Gore. When Bill Clinton was done and Al Gore was running, Gore's people faced this same dilemma. How much of course, they were looking at then a president, who had a lot of albatrosses around his neck, Monica Lewinsky and impeachment and other kinds of stuff that Joe Biden doesn't have. But it's the same dilemma. How much do we embrace? I was his VP. So how much do I embrace the sitting current president? How much do I say, listen, you know what? I'm a different kind of animal. I am going to do some things differently. I appreciated that. We got some things done. But here, I'm setting out a new course for my administration should I win. And that's what Kamala's been trying to do in the last week. Most notably with her economic speech on Friday, she tried to start charting a new and different course because some of the Biden, era policies are not all that favorable to people. And they still have bad feelings about inflation, the economy, immigration. And so she's going to have to do that. She's going to be forced to do that in the next 80 days.
And on the positive side, I mean, this is a guy who did get transformative legislation through a troubled political scene. Biden.
Yeah, well, right. And she will embrace some of those things. She will talk about the number of jobs they created. She will talk about the fact that inflation has reduced significantly, to the point where it is now, compared to 2 years ago. She'll talk about how they successfully navigated the end of COVID. I mean, there'll be a lot of those things. We're on the verge potentially of a Mideast agreement, although that is so volatile, I would expect that they'll stay away from that this week, unless they are pleasantly surprised with an agreement signed in the next 4 days.
That would be extraordinary.
Yeah, it would be, and that would be a huge gap. That would be, and I have no doubt that behind the scenes, the Biden-Harris people have said that would be awesome if we could pull that off. But it's looking right now today like that may be tough slogging.
Yeah, betting against a peace agreement is always a good bet in the Middle East, sadly. But as mentioned, I like that Peter mentioned this in the chat. He said he greeted, and he's talking about Biden, greeted the Russian hostages home. He's talking about Biden's general sort of alertness and energy. But more to the point, it was a talking point for Trump and the GOP that, you know, when I get into office, Donald Trump, I'll get those Russian hostages freed. So that was a win for this administration to get that done during their administration. And, you know, right? I mean, that was, I put that in that same category of positives as as a peace agreement might be.
Yeah, and you could also, you know, there's a lot of things that they could say, right? They could say, well, look at the Ukrainian pushback on the Russians in the last 2 weeks. Well, that's because, you know, Biden led, the Harris-Biden team would say, that's because Biden led the international coalition, most notably our NATO partners, to get behind Ukraine, provide the armaments, push back against Putin. And now we have this counterinsurgency going on that, by all accounts, people saying is really rattling Putin, is changing some of the dynamics of that conflict. And now we have all of a sudden in the last couple of days, Mark, you know, Zelensky saying, listen, time for us to have 200-mile range, you know, cruise missiles to strap onto those F-16s you guys are going to be dropping on us soon, you know? So there's a lot of things that could be said about these things. And it's going to be really interesting to see how much the Harris Walz team take the Biden-Harris playbook, slip a couple pages out of there and put them in their own, and how much they just say, yeah, you know what? We did some good things then, but it's a brand new playbook.
You know, it's interesting, too, that there has been a kind of economic prosperity that's existed, but it hasn't trickled down to many of us in American life. And yet we've been ahead of the developed world in coming out of COVID. This is all under the Biden administration, right? I mean, Biden had to navigate this, and some of his economics team is going to make it over to the Harris team. It's a weird thing because you do have to, as you suggest, to rip out pages. You know, you have to pick and choose, and in so doing, you can get the brags, but how do you get it without, you know, some of the stink of of an unpopular president? And Biden clearly was that.
Yeah, and the challenge really in the next 3 months is going to be felt realities of average voters versus the economic data. This is what every White House struggles with, okay? Look at the numbers, they'll say. Look at the numbers, look at the numbers. Biden tried to make that argument in May and in June, and it did not land, as you know, Mark, because people's felt perceptions are, and you can understand this, because we have to remember, though the fact that, you know, on an annualized basis, you know, we're now down in the 2-3% range for inflation. When it was up at 6, 7, 8%, bread still hasn't decreased in price, right? It's still high priced in the store, though the inflation averages have dropped significantly. And it's that felt reality that kept hitting Biden over the head with the 2x4 when voters were saying, yeah, but, okay? And that's the challenge that Harris still faces.
Yeah, I was talking about that before. The economy is also complicated, and politics and messaging is not complicated, meaning complex messages don't get through. So you've got to keep your messaging simple. So I kind of liked, and this is I'm beta testing this with you. I kind of liked that she mentioned price gouging, and even though we know there are price gouging laws for emergency situations, et cetera, but I think in general the public hears price gouging and they go, yeah, I'm paying too much for whatever. In other words, they don't distinguish price gouging from collusive price fixing, this kind of thing. So messaging on the economy is both complicated and yet you have to keep it simple.
Yeah, what's interesting about that price gouging, price fixing, price whatever, is that, you know, in the most bare knuckle terms, it's an attempt to shift or, you know, at least move the responsibility for those high prices elsewhere, right? I mean, in politics, you don't want to just be the guy or gal that says, Yeah, blame me. It's all my fault. Heck. But let's do another 4 years and try again. That doesn't work very well. So corporations, as you well know, particularly from the Democratic Party point of view, have often been, a good place to assign blame. Same thing when it comes to taxes. They're getting the tax benefits. It's the rich corporations. And so that message has resonated. And, people are angry. I mean, you can't get around the visceral realities that voters are still upset that when they walk into the store, things in some cases are 50% more than they were 3 or 4 years ago. And of course, that was the argument that, that Reagan made back in 1980 that Trump has been trying to make, which is that classic line: are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? When you walk into the store and walk out with your kids, do you feel better or worse than you did 4 years ago? That's what the Trump team is trying to get traction on. I think they're having some success with that, more limited than I think they maybe expected or would hope. And so the Harris-Walz team are doing everything they can to say, look, it's not our fault, at least exclusively. Look at this price gouging. Look at the taking advantage of things in the supply chain where everybody's been tacking on percentage increases that aren't warranted.
And I think, and I'm guessing you'll agree with me, that making corporations the bad guys that you yell at and talk about, we're going to take care of these greedy corporations that have led to a lot of these conditions, that's not a bad political move, and there might be some truth to it.
Well, I mean, unless you're part of the corporate world, right? Corporations, they are a fairly easy target, right? They're this amorphous entity that somehow has gotten, in some people's mind, undue First Amendment protections by the Supreme Court, campaign contribution protections. They're like, wait a minute, are they individuals or not? Or are they giant megaliths that hide behind a Wizard of Oz curtains? I mean, most people don't have much affection for the word corporation by its very, sort of ambiance. It's like, nah, those can't be the good guys.
That's exactly right. And I think that the idea somehow that Kamala Harris and her people are shaking their fists at corporations and suggesting that they might be behind some of this. They talk about price gouging. I don't know what sticks, but it seems to me that those might be pretty good boogeymen to go after in sort of this, your messaging about the economy anyway. Listen, I've kept you over time. Thank you. I know this is a big week for you, and if there's any breaking news, we may put the bat beam up and ask you to come back in. But so appreciate you and look forward to next week as well, Gary. Thanks so much.
Of course, Mark. And by the way, I love the new studio look, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Oh, how about that? Wow. All right, love you, man. Thank you so much. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Bye, Gary.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah. I mean, this is a big thing. Messaging is so key. We talked about it for years. I mean, it's just I'd say it's a centerpiece of everything political. And whenever you're trying to communicate anything, how you message is key. Yeah, we've got a new studio and some new camera stuff and other stuff, so everything isn't quite settled out. So thank you for your forbearance and your understanding. Forbearance is a ding word. I do think that it's kind of a newer look, and I want to give a quick shout out to Anthony Davis, who is a friend of the show and has the designer's eye and also the technical mind to make it all happen. I can't always get Tony to come up from his superhero lair to do everything. So
Thanks, Tony.
I was happy that Anthony, who was
he has a much better
able...
eye than me. It's fine. I am very practical in the stuff that I put together, and it looks good. I think it looks really good.
Oh, thank you. Well, there you go.
Thanks, Tony.
All right.
Better than what I could have done. I'll admit it.
Well, I don't know about that, but
Is that a new on-air sign in the back, and why isn't it red?
well, so here's the story on this on-air sign. That those who are just listening, there's like an on-air sign, a radio kind of on-air thing that you might put on a studio. And the reason that we don't have it on is because it blinks on air like that, and we thought that would be distracting, so we don't have it. That's the reason. the competition in the market. I think Jose de Jesus is exactly right. We want diversity, competition in the market. And I think that it is true that, and this is what I was talking about, stop the conglomerates, he says. The M&A structures that have been allowed to sort of run amok in America have reduced competition, and that does sadly lead to higher prices. It also leads to all kinds of situations that take advantage of the consumer, honestly. I mean, you see it in media, you see it in broadcast. Don't part with the finger puppet. 4 to 8 years. Oh, Motorex says the Kamala Harris finger puppet should remain a part of the show. All right, well, that's the Kamala Harris finger puppet. We got it before her nomination, and we're proud to have it. Jim Slayton, be kind, rewind.
Big shout out.
Big shout out to Jim. Trump is right next. Hang on a second. Damn it, Mark. This is from Luis.
Big shout out.
Damn it, Mark. Trump is right. Next, everyone will have health care. That is so un-American. Where will it end? LOL. Yeah, that's his big thing. Before you know it, everybody will have it. What kind of world will that be? No contendo.
Big shout out.
With a $5 super chat. 45 bully GE, GM, Ford, Chrysler, but is silent toward grocery manufacturers, Walmart, etc. In the same breath, he tells the petrol industry, pay to play. Yeah, well, there is such manifest corruption in that Trump world that I don't even know where to start. But you're right that he's made no bones about it. You know, if you give me the check, I'll give you the executive order. Are tiny Tic Tac cases made for tiny
Big shout out.
Says Wes. $5 super sticker. I did want to mention, because we talk about it in the thumbnail, and then I'll maybe get to what else do I have? Kim, I've got nothing before True Crime Corner, right?
Right, just news if you want to.
Okay, I've got news. No, I've got news in a second, definitely. But this is for the yellow card for Randy. Says wow, people
shout out.
are buying a
Yellow
chance
cards.
to yellow card Randy. Randy actually is a very smart guy.
Yeah.
He sends me some long, reflective, and well-sourced emails. But that doesn't mean he's right. It just means he's smart. There are a lot of smart people who aren't right. So, and he's right about some things and wrong about others. But I think he's, I haven't read a lot today in the chat because I, obviously been doing other stuff, but we love him. But he's also somebody who is a provocateur,
We're going to hit you so hard like you've never been hit before.
Oh, there it is. That is sent to me by Trevor. Trevor in Hollywood sent me 68 different Trump bites.
Whoa.
I went through them because I can't run 68. I was going to play a bunch for the audience. And again, I'll
We're
play.
going to hit you so hard like you've never been hit before.
Now, I like that
pretty
because
good,
because I'm partial to anything that is like, there's never been anything like this. We've never done this before.
There is nothing in our history that quite compares to this.
I have never heard of something like that.
Yeah. So when he says that,
we're going to hit you so hard like you've never been hit before.
I really like. I like that. But
everything is bad.
Yeah, that's another one he sent me. This is all from Trevor.
I've never seen anything like it.
Oh, that's another thing like it. Oh, that will definitely make the cut.
I've never seen anything like it.
Oh, good. So
Did he send you that whole "I'm better looking than her" clip? Because that's hilarious.
Oh yes.
Why are we having an election?
That's good.
Yeah, that one's a good one too.
The whole thing is crazy.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to take some of them back to my cottage and have a lot of fun.
I don't even know what that was in reference to. Maybe
he was talking about the grocery store items and specifically the Cheerios on the table.
Oh.
Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
The whole thing is crazy.
Okay. So
I think I'm entitled to personal attacks.
Yeah. These are all sent by
a lot of people like him. I think they like me too.
The single most embarrassing day in the history of our country.
All right.
Our country's going to die.
Yeah, I don't like drops that mention die, so I kind of tend to go.
People make donuts and they make lots of things. It's all about the oil.
He's out of his mind. He really is.
People make donuts and they make lots of things. It's all about the oil.
Yeah.
If a mobster said that, they'd be put in jail immediately. Trump, you're guilty.
All right. These are
Today we're doing it, and we're doing it right now.
All right.
He's an angry man, and he should be an angry man.
He really went off. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of losing his.
He's losing his
mind.
marbles.
I was having lunch with people that if I told you who they were, you wouldn't even believe it.
Yeah.
They were afraid of Trump because they had no idea where the hell I was coming from.
Yeah.
What was that all about? What was that all about? Mm-hmm. She's been unbelievable in terms of her badness.
Yeah, these are all.
I wish I didn't have to do this.
Yeah.
I was seeing people that were not seeable, that I wouldn't want to see them and they wouldn't want to see me.
I wouldn't be able to change.
Yeah. He's.
All they have to do to end it is rule against me or whatever it is.
I was seeing people that were not seeable.
You don't mind if I go off teleprompter for a second, do you? You don't mind if I go off teleprompter for a second, do you?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my favorite of all time. That was one of the most successful shows ever done.
Oh, he was talking about The Apprentice, right?
That was one of the most successful shows ever done.
God almighty.
They don't want me to be a little bit nasty. They want to put me in prison. Me.
That's pretty good.
Of all
I
the
like
people.
I like the second half of that.
They want to put me in prison. Me.
Yeah, that's my drop right there. Yeah.
They want to put me in prison.
Oh, he actually did it. He already clipped it. That's
I wouldn't be able to change.
Yeah. I was looking for where he says I'm better looking. Oh, here he is. Yeah.
I'm a better looking person than Kamala.
Yeah. Gosh,
I'm a better looking person than Kamala. In many ways, I guess they're stupid,
Yeah. And
they're all horrible. These are horrible human beings.
No, I don't want to do that anymore.
Well, there you go. Trevor, thank you. I culled the 68 you sent me down to those which you've just heard, and there is, I think, a handful in there that you will kind of hear percolate to the top. We just have to figure it out. I just got all these things.
They want to put me in prison.
Yeah. It's worth noting, if Trump loses this election, and by the way, he may very well not lose this election. I know everybody's feeling a bounce in their step. Kamala. The polls are up. We'll play you the JD Vance stuff from the weekend. But with our ridiculous electoral college, it's very possible that Trump wins. It really is. It's a 50-50 shot. I'll remind you that Biden election was settled by 48,000 votes. It's a handful of votes. Now, Trump will lose the popular vote, but we're this illusory democracy. We're a democratic republic where the people's voice is stomped out in so many different ways. Anyway, it's a 50-50 shot. So before everybody gets a little too far out over their skis, keep in mind that as it sits right now, there are ways to victory for Donald Trump. And we'll be reviewing some of them as the day goes on and as the week goes on here. Even as we cover a little bit of the convention, it's important not to lose track of the many paths to victory that Donald Trump still has. We can call him crazy. We don't understand his appeal. We can say that there's a ceiling. And I think there really is a ceiling, particularly as he continues these attacks that he launches. But that said, he could easily win. So that's why voting's so important. I mean, to the extent that and he's already setting the tone for protesting and challenging the outcome, as you know. Kim, what would you say if they fixed prices and your retirement account tanked? I see.
This is the thing. There's this now response.
That's what Champagne Wishes is asking. Anyway, go ahead.
There's this response to, Kamala Harris looking at price gouging. Like, if she keeps the prices in check, if she tells people they need to, not gouge consumers, then the stock market will go crazy and companies will, everything will freak out and the prices of stocks will tank and the economy will collapse. So you're telling me that this fear that you have means that companies should be allowed to just run roughshod over the American public? Is that what you're saying? Like there should be no restrictions at all? What do you want?
I think that that is overblown. Pricing is a dynamic thing. It's complex. And the idea somehow that this very general basic policy she's proposed, it's not even a specific. And you're already getting your britches in a bunch about what's going to happen to your 401k. I just think it's really a misplaced anxiety. As I say, I'll talk more about it. Kim's news first, and then I'll give you a moment about it. But I really feel as though you're going from handling price gouging to price fixing to the extent of price fixing. As I say, it already exists in our society. I'll run down a little bit more of this, but we're getting way behind. Let's do Kim's news, and then I will address that. But I appreciate Mark's measured pessimism, says Brent. Yes, I'm nothing if not a bit looking at life in a bleak way.
It's fantastic.
Yes, well, of course, Trump is going to claim it was rigged or stolen. If Trump loses, I worry what violence it may cause. Yeah. Mountain bike fan says that. I'll just say one thing about that, and I really do want to get to Kim's news. The thing I would say about that, and big shout out, is I'd say, sure, I worry about that, and I just read a long piece, I think it was in ProPublica, on the militias and the rise of militias and the 3%ers and how they're 3%ers in many law enforcement agencies, etc. I also think that coexists with a reality that the J6ers didn't get off, and if they lose this election, Trump loses, I think that there's a heavy price to pay for violence and political violence. And on some level, there's a cultural understanding of that within those groups. And so, as the Proud Boys leader goes to prison for effectively the rest of his adult life, I think you need to remember that they're not completely blind to that either. They have families, they have children, many of them, and I don't know if they want to risk all of that for the fever dream that is somehow we're going to take over America. So, again, that might just be a hope, but I would say, sure, there could be some one-offs, and there might even be some pockets of unrest. But I don't know if you're going to see the kind of thing that you're worried about in America. So I'll remind you, it is America, and the election happens right in the middle of the NFL season, everybody, and it's very hard to get a lot of these guys out there with their assault rifles and all the rest when the Ravens are playing the Patriots on Sunday. You understand what come on, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. In the end, we just want ESPN and to be left alone. That's America. Give me my Chinese takeout and my Sunday night football. That's the typical American male, and it is driven by a lot of men, this stuff. So, all right, smash the like button like a boss. Kim's news, a word about price fixing when we come back, only because there seems to be interest in it. And then True Crime Corner still to come. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCafe.com. CoachellaValleyCafe.com.
Yeah, give it a little riff.
little something. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Israel has accepted a U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal for the war in Gaza. Speaking from Tel Aviv, Blinken told reporters today that it is now on Hamas to accept this deal. Blinken stressing the current negotiations to push for a truce between Israel and Hamas may well be the last chance to reach a deal to end this war. Police in Chicago are bracing for protests at the Democratic National Convention. Kind of see what the stage looks like there a little bit. The first day kicking off. Businesses have already boarded up windows. Officials setting up fencing around the United Center. They've lined the streets with trucks. Protests against Israel are expected to last all week. Thousands of people will be taking part with that. And day one of the DNC is devoted to honoring President Biden's long public service, career, and legacy. Vice President Kamala Harris will be among the leaders paying tribute tonight. Former presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton are scheduled to address the delegates Tuesday and Wednesday, respectively. Other big-name speakers include former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Vice Presidential nominee Tim Walz, and former First Lady Michelle Obama. It is the last day in office for our friend here, New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, he of the gold bars, following his conviction on federal fraud charges. The 70-year-old Menendez will officially resign his Senate seat Tuesday, ending nearly half a century in New Jersey politics. Governor Phil Murphy's former chief of staff, George Helmy, will temporarily fill that Senate seat until after the November election. Former President Trump made a little mistake over the weekend. He shared a seemingly artificial intelligence generated image of Taylor Swift, falsely claiming an endorsement from the singer. No, it was AI and it was a fake. In a social media post Sunday, Trump posted an image of Swift as Uncle Sam that said, "Taylor wants you to vote for Donald Trump." He captioned the post with, "I accept." Swift endorsed President Biden in the 2020 election. She has not formally endorsed any candidate in this year's race, and she has not yet responded to that post. There was a man rescued from underneath the Great Highway in San Francisco in just this crazy case. The man apparently stuck in a pipe underneath the Great Highway in San Francisco, had crawled.
What?
Yeah. Check out the picture of this pipe rescue. There was a lot of people out there trying to save this man who was heard screaming. He apparently was seriously hurt after getting trapped in a sewer pipe 20 feet below the road. Someone heard him calling for help near a manhole early yesterday in the Outer Sunset neighborhood. Firefighters finally pulled him to safety about 90 minutes later. They say he crawled into the sewer from a beach and hit his head and then couldn't get out. So pretty scary situation there for him. And I don't know what would cause you to crawl into a pipe from the beach, but crawl he did. Thank goodness somebody heard him and he was rescued. But what a scene there.
Wow. We still don't know why he crawled in, you're saying?
We don't know why. Not at all. The Millennial Tower in San Francisco. We have an ongoing issue. Oops, there it is, with the Millennial Tower, and work is underway to replace windows there. The order came in 2020 after one window broke in high winds from the 41st floor, but the safety upgrades didn't start until last fall. Now City Supervisor Aaron Peskin says progress has been very frustrating and slow. Since crews won't be done until March, owners are being told to close their windows in windy weather or face up to a $10,000 fine for opening the window. Yikes. Today in the city of Long Beach, it is the removal of problematic homeless encampments. Encampment locations identified as problematic so far are outside of the library near a park. Several tents make up the encampment near that park. The city has posted signs in the area warning the encampment will be taken apart this week. Long Beach officials say they're following the recent Supreme Court decision giving local governments more flexibility to remove these homeless encampments. Governor Gavin Newsom is also urging cities and counties to get tougher about removing these areas from public places. There is a new law in California to prevent car break-ins. Owners no longer have to prove that the doors of the vehicle were locked. Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill to close that loophole. Victims can now make their cases by showing forced entry. Senator Scott Wiener was behind the change, calls this a big step forward for accountability on auto burglary. Attention, home buyers and sellers across the state. They have new rules that went into effect over the weekend, changing how commissions work. Have you heard about this? At the close of escrow, sellers can now decide whether to pay the buyer's broker anything, and if so, how much. Buyers will also have to negotiate how much they're willing to pay the agent representing them. Most listings won't be allowed to reveal the amount. So different pay structure for real estate agents. Everything's changing.
The problem with this is that, again, it's the law of unintended consequences. People, again, feel gouged maybe by these commissions, which have been in place for, decades. But these are the ways that real estate agents are incentivized to move inventory. So when you all of a sudden have no commission that will be paid, it's likely that your house won't be shown, or certainly won't be shown to as many people. Now you can negotiate different deals, but you could always do that. You could always negotiate different deals with real estate agents. You didn't have to pay 5 or 6%. If you wanted a lower percentage, you could do it. But again, you might pay a price in terms of the way that your house is featured. That said, we'll have to see how this all shakes out. It definitely throws a wrench into the way things have normally been done. But in the end, I suspect that things are going to the water is going to seek its own level, and it may not be that much different from where it is.
Well, we'll see how it goes. In addition, more Californians are earning a paycheck, have more money to pay those real estate prices. The state created more than 21,000 jobs last month and made history in the fast food industry, topping 750,000 jobs for the first time. That's thanks to the minimum wage rising to $20 an hour for fast food workers in April. Governor Gavin Newsom says the job growth highlights the strength of California's economy, which is still the 5th largest in the world. So California creates nearly 1 in 5 of the nation's new jobs. The California home featured in the horror movie classic Poltergeist, it's up for sale. This according to the listing, a 4-bedroom Simi Valley home selling for nearly $1.2 million. In case you missed it, the 1982 movie is about a suburban family whose home is haunted by ghosts that abduct their young daughter. The film depicts the house as being built over an old graveyard that the owners were never told about. However,
I was recording it. That's how it ends?
Oh, that's how it ends. I just got chills. The listing promises this house is definitely not haunted. I am so never, ever buying the Poltergeist house. Are you kidding me? Who wants that house now? Forget it.
I have to tell you that when I was in a galaxy far, far away many years ago, I was on the MGM lot, which is where they shot Poltergeist. Now it's a Sony lot in Hollywood. And I was there with my little brother. And I say little brother because I think at the time he might have been 16 and I was 26, something like that. Maybe he wasn't much older than that. And we're knocking around because it's kind of exciting to be on a movie lot. There are all kinds of different movies being shot and different stuff being done, and people are walking around in costumes, some of them, et cetera.
Yeah.
So Poltergeist was shot on a closed set. I'll remind you that it was directed by Steven Spielberg, I think, wasn't it? You can check that. Yeah. So anyway, I didn't know if we should go near that set, and yet I knew that was the movie being talked about because it was a Spielberg movie. So
Google it.
And I think it was right. I think that was it. Long story longer, we go on to the Poltergeist set because it said closed set, and there was one of those little red lights, like the things that are on the top of cop cars, that was going around saying, do not enter with blah, blah, blah. But we just walked in like we belonged there, and they were shooting the scene where the woman, the older lady, is looking, I think, at a TV or something, or she's looking at a flashing light. It was flashing at her. And I think the dialogue was walk into the light. Tony, did you see the movie Poltergeist? I feel like that would be a Tony movie. But
I really don't do horror, but
is that right?
Thanks, Tony. I'm trying to find a thing of that scene. It's with the little
little old lady. Yeah. So we saw that scene being shot. So we waited on the set for about an hour, watched that, and then we just slipped out, and that was it. That's my big Poltergeist story. But then when the movie came out, I mean, that's a big scene, and of course, they I think Poltergeist, Amityville Horror, I always put them, I always get them confused. One's built over a graveyard, another's built over, I forget which is which.
Hell. One's built over hell. Yeah. Remember?
There she is. Yeah, that was the lady on the set that day. Right. Thank you. Very good grab, Tony.
No,
Yeah.
don't you remember in the the one
Thanks,
that was
Tony.
built, the one built over hell, that you go down to the basement and there is you open a hole and there's a fiery pit or something, like an old fireplace.
They really should negotiate commissions on that. I mean,
The
that's
entrance
a
to the
real rough
underworld?
spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd think that would come out in disclosures. By the way, don't go in the basement unless you really want to sit down with Satan.
Speaking of movies that are based in horror, the picture of this one just really freaks me out.
Oh, I really want to see this. I pitched this to Courtney the other day.
It didn't get such good reviews from
Alien
our friends.
Romulus. Yeah, did Snyder not like it?
He said if you like this kind of thing. Yeah. Otherwise, a lot of people are saying it's kind of a carbon copy of the original. They're trying to copy everything. But Alien Romulus, nonetheless, dominated at the weekend box office. The 7th installment in the Alien franchise grossed an impressive $41.5 million. The second best opening in the franchise's history. Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool and Wolverine fell to second, taking in a projected $29 million. Meanwhile, his wife Blake Lively's It Ends With Us took third with $24 million.
Blake Lively is in a lot of trouble. And by the way, just because she's sort of a little tone deaf on what's going on, she tried to turn the premiere of the movie, from what I understand, into kind of this ebullient sort of up thing, like it's a rom-com, and it's actually a story about abuse and domestic abuse and all the rest. So she's getting a lot of blowback. Randy, rescuing himself from flirting with a yellow card today, gets Spielberg wrote Poltergeist, but it was directed by Tobe Hooper. Wow, good knowledge from Randy. Well done, Randy. Thank you.
Big shout out.
Yeah, big shout out. Appreciate
This
that.
report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com with the tea that just arrived at my house yesterday. I'm trying the mango. I tried it for the first time yesterday. Huge thumbs up to the mango tea. Love it. Really, really good. And they have a mango sun tea, which I'm going to try next. Really, really incredible. So CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, not only great teas, but great coffees. And I did get a little sample of a coffee to try as well.
That's right. And for our listener viewers, if you enter Mark T at checkout, you get 10% off and you get the additional taste of this new coffee that they've brought forward. That's what Kim's talking about. So they will send that to you as a gift. If you go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, you make your order and you put Mark T at checkout, they send you this additional little gifty, which is their new coffee. I consider it almost a dessert coffee. It's sweet and delicious, just like my darling Courtney. Just having some now. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson. The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
My beautiful Christians, I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
It was wrong, it was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
Saudi Arabia pays cash.
Let me tell you, it is just days away. August 29th. 2 glorious hours virtually meeting up with everybody who is part of it. We have special guests. Spencer Christian's going to be there. Jim Avila, the former ABC News correspondent, he's going to join. Now he can't join on the show because he's got a regular job as a journalist, but he covered the White House for, 10 years. He was the lead correspondent at ABC. He'll join us and more. These are just a couple that come to mind. Most of our regular contributors will be there along with you. Here's how you join our end of summer Zoom meetup. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. Imagine just sitting there in pajamas, getting to hang out. It's August 29th, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Pacific time. So please make the adjustment for your time zone. We'll give spots to the first 25 people. It is a capital raise for us. We're trying to raise a little bit of money for the show so we can afford, various things. You can see some of the stuff we're doing, and it costs money. You sign up at our PayPal, you donate $50, and you lock up a spot. Then when you make the donation, by the way, just note meetup. There's a place on there you can just note, just put for the meetup or, meetup. And then RSVP after you've done that to mtsmeetup@gmail.com. So again, $50 at PayPal, note meetup, and then RSVP to mtsmeetup@gmail.com. It's August 29th. It's a Thursday night, our end of summer Zoom meetup, 6:30 p.m. We get underway Pacific time. By the way, Nikki Maduro will join us too, which is very cool. There's a lot. It's really coming together as kind of something of a special event. So if you haven't quite pulled it together, please do. We'd love to have you. Bravo.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm running so far behind, I think. Courtney joins us with True Crime Corner on Mondays. What is that?
Do you want to do the news?
We did the news, Courtney. Thank you. Thank you for listening. You've already done it. But I'm trying to figure, I told everybody I would do a little bit on price fixing, price gouging. I like that Harris has called out this as an economic strategy. I also like the fact that it's sort of broad stroked. I think a lot of people are angry about some of the pricing. It's not just groceries. But when you hear, well, I'll give you a couple of examples, and then I will get to Courtney. Courtney, forgive me, you'll permit me to.
No. This is great.
But I was just trying to give you some quick parameters. When price fixing, there are a lot of ways in which consumers are feeling gouged right now. I'll give you two of them off the top that have nothing to do with groceries. Okay. And I'll give you two of them off the top that have nothing to do with groceries that this administration, the Biden administration, is actually doing something about. Ticketmaster, when they screw you with a transaction fee at the end of your transaction, which is well in excess of any sort of reasonable shipping and handling fee, that is a kind of gouging that you feel. Now, you may not, again, feel that it falls into the category of gouging. This is what we were talking about in the first hour, the gouging that happens during an emergency. And there are laws against that, fuel, water, etc. That when price gouging is illegal in most states. But this is the kind of gouging that people feel. Consumers feel that. You get angry at Ticketmaster. You get angry at StubHub. And it's wrong. And this administration actually has, and I'm not a flack for the Biden administration, but I'm saying this administration has taken steps to knock that down, right? I'll give you another one, again, that has nothing to do with groceries. The airlines. There are fewer and fewer airlines that are operating independently. More and more in the way of mergers, these airlines are allowed to tack on fees. That's one of the ways that they found a profit center. They tack on fees for your luggage, your second piece of luggage, your change. Anytime you want to change a ticket, there are all sorts of ways that fees are built in to many of these various situations when it comes to travel. Again, you feel what? Gouged. So when we talk about gouging and fighting gouging, it becomes, I think, a term that's quite appropriate for the way consumers feel. It's not always about grocery stores. But again, the last thing I would say is that there is no kind of price control necessarily that Kamala Harris has suggested in some way that I yet have a problem with. I will speak up against it if I think there's a problem. But there are already, if you missed it, I'll just mention it again, price controls across different areas of the American economy. Utilities is the one that comes to mind immediately. They just can't charge you whatever they want. There's a commission that has to approve it. It has to go through the legislature. Now, you may feel, hey, it's rubber stamped. Whatever they want, they get. Okay, but it is controlled in some way. They're usury laws. They're, in other words, controlling the amount they can charge you on your credit card. These are all things that exist already. The feds, they control the amount of interest. The prime rate is controlled by the feds. It's a very complicated world, the world of the economy. But when Kamala Harris and those who are around her and economic advisors who both operated in the Biden administration and now will continue with Kamala Harris talk about having to address these things, these are some of the areas that they are tackling. And they are legitimate, both political wins that don't leave them in the situation where it's socialist or communist. So I don't get, and we'll talk again about this, my darling Courtney Waiting with True Crime Corner. And I guess this is a pretty hot one from what I understand. But what I would say is I do want to talk about it more in the next couple of days because I know many of you are saying my 401k is going to. So you think anything that holds corporations to account is going to be so rough that it's going to affect your 401k? You're wrong. You're wrong. AT&T was broken up. That was broken up. That wasn't price fixing. Right? These monopolies, and there are more and more conversations about Google and Meta and the fact that they may have to be broken up or handled in some way. They will survive, and your 401k actually may flourish in an environment that encourages greater competition. So I don't yet see where the shoe pinches for your 401k. But, all right, that's frankly a little, and Bill Deutsch says, maybe the pricing should be on food and necessities. Yeah, maybe food and necessities and things like that should be handled the way interest rates are handled, controlled, regulated. Generally speaking, we have a supply and demand economy, but we also have every which way that it's not really a supply and demand economy. As you know, we end up propping up big oil, and there are any number of benefits that Elon Musk, for example, has accrued because we've offered all of these subsidies to the electric car industry and credits he gets in various other ways. So, all right, Courtney, please stop delaying things. I've got to get things underway here.
Mark Thompson Show.
Before we get your formal segment started, is there anything you'd like to share, Courtney?
I like the new studio. That was a surprise when I came in.
That's
yeah, it looks good.
That's your boyfriend, Anthony Davis.
Oh, I love Anthony Davis.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
I know. What's not to love?
Everything he touches is better.
That's true.
So,
I do love him.
Yeah, but it's and I also heard you talking about Alien. I told you that was the first scary movie I ever saw, and I still can actually feel myself as a little girl watching the original Alien and being very scared.
How old were you when you saw Alien?
When did it come out? Like 82, 83?
I don't remember. Yeah, early 80s, right?
I was young.
Might have been 81.
I was young, yeah. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great to be here. I mean, it's.
I wish we could see you, Courtney, says Julie. And the truth is, you'll see Courtney on the meetup. If you want to see Courtney, go for the meetup.
Yeah,
that's your avatar that's up there right now. But
that's my avatar.
He says about Alien, the new Alien. Where is Michael Snyder? Says reviewed it on Friday. Not awful, but a bit hackneyed considering the talented cast. I think he was talking about Alien. I don't know.
Oh,
there it is. That's the original Alien. Oh, man.
Oh, God, yeah.
In space, no one can hear you scream. Oh, my God. What a great slug line that is. Yeah.
I remember I was at a friend's house. It must have been once it was on VHS because I was at a friend's house and her older brother was watching it. And we walked in and I was never the same.
1982. Yeah. Thank you, Peter. I had an experience like that watching on VHS a movie called The Thing.
Oh, yeah.
The Thing with, it was Kurt Russell. Is that who it was? Yeah. Kurt Russell and a terrific cast. I think Wilford Brimley's in the cast also.
I love Wilford Brimley.
It's spectacular. And, it was not, you weren't talking about that, Michael. The Thing, that's it. Man, I watched that on my TV in San Francisco, and it was a rental. And I remember being on the couch, and I was just like in the fetal position. It is so good. That is still one of the best movies you'll ever. Remember, there was no CGI then. Everything they do there, they do with puppetry. It's incredible.
Is that Viggo Mortensen in the middle? No.
No, that's
else.
it's Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell.
And it's still.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And our guy who comes in here regularly, Jeff Dixon, when he comes in at Halloween and rates horror films, he says that maybe it's in his top 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway. All right, enough.
I actually was listening to you talk about Blake Lively, and another point in that, which is interesting about the marketing of This Ends With Us, is the 2 different posters they had. So they actually had an original poster for the film through June that was far more maybe serious in tone. It definitely had a different tone to it, different tagline. And then as of July, they changed it where it featured only Blake Lively. But the original poster had 2 people on it and multiple cast members. So the whole thing is an interesting case study in sort of social media and what happens with a film on a subject matter like this.
Yeah, you followed that very closely. So there was some stop motion animation in the thing too. Oh, good knowledge from Tom. And then last thing, just because we had it. He was talking about the union. I see, not about. Okay. No Contendo says, and thank you for the super chat.
Big shout out.
This is the way it works, Courtney. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but people with the super chat, you can throw us a couple $, and we'll read your comment on the air.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's called
nice.
a super chat.
Yeah.
And
I
this
like No
is,
Contendo.
No Contendo puts the super in super chat.
Big shout out.
Airline, cruise ship, oil, gas industry all got bailouts under Trump. Post-COVID, they raised rates, and we're wrong for asking for price control. Thank you, No Contendo. I feel like No Contendo and I could be good friends. Yeah. Anyway, on Mondays, we like to look at the world of true crime. My other half is a true crime aficionado. I know nothing about true crime. I mean, literally, you're about to hear about a really high-profile case that a lot of Bay Area people know. In fact, Kim McAllister covered this case in detail, and I am so averse to true crime that I barely know the details of this case. Without any further delay, this is True Crime Corner.
Let's pay a visit to Mark's True Crime Corner.
This is not a good neighborhood. I'm scared.
Now, here's your host, Mark Thompson.
And we welcome my other half, Courtney, to the mix.
Thank you.
You're going to do a story today that Kim McAllister covered, I think, quite thoroughly and in a detailed way.
I think that Kim might know this case better than me, actually.
Kim, are you going to participate, or is this usually where... Okay, good.
No,
All right,
I mean,
good.
if you want me to, I think Courtney's got the story.
Yeah, well, Courtney...
It's interesting about this story is my sister at the time thought she wanted to be like me, and so she went into media. She later discovered this was not her path. But at the time, she was working at the CBS affiliate in Sacramento, KOVR 13, which is kind of home base for the reporting in Modesto. So when Laci Peterson disappeared, my sister was sent out to talk to the family members and to get the story.
Oh,
and
my God.
There's this B-roll that is played in every single Laci Peterson story, documentary, news coverage, and it's of my sister and another reporter, I think maybe her photographer, standing and talking to Scott Peterson. And every time I see it, I think to myself, get away from my sister. You're too close to my sister. But yeah, so she was covering it in Sacramento. Of course, I was covering it on the radio in San Francisco on KGO from, the time she disappeared in Modesto to the time the remains were found at the Berkeley Marina to the trial in Redwood City. So yeah, both of us were on this story.
So for those of us who are new to this whole story, first of all, it's a Netflix series, I guess now.
Yeah.
American Murder, Laci Peterson. What is the story? She was a woman who went missing, apparently.
Yes. So we're talking about it this week. Tomorrow is actually the first time that Scott is speaking publicly since he was found guilty. Mm-hmm. And that is a special that's going to be on Peacock. And last week, August 14th, there was a limited series that came out on Netflix. And this is all, too, because an organization in Los Angeles called the Los Angeles Innocence Project has agreed to bring the case back on appeal, claiming that they have evidence that will exonerate Scott.
So Scott is her husband, I take it?
So Lacey Peterson and Scott were married. Lacey was 27. She was 8.5 months pregnant. Her due date was January 10th. And this all takes place in December of 2002. So they meet at a cafe. They're both really big foodies. They fall in love pretty quickly and get married. They're still in school. And then after school, they open a restaurant. They create a home together. But immediately after they get married, Scott begins cheating on Lacey. And actually, one of his mistresses walks in on him and Lacey, which is strange. I feel like Lacey would have mentioned that to her parents. But that is, in fact, one of the stories that I heard while researching this case. And so Lacey and Scott are married. She really wants a baby. She was effervescent. She was the life of the party. She was funny. She was smart. Everybody loved Lacey. And I make this point because she would have just been such a wonderful mother. And so they did not get pregnant. They had challenges getting pregnant, but she was finally pregnant in the year of 2002. And so they go into the holidays, and Scott had said previously that he didn't want children, but then agreed to start a family with Lacey, and so they get pregnant. When one of Lacey's family members asked Scott what he wants, he said, "I was hoping for infertility." So that gives you a sense of how excited he was for the newborn baby. It said that he wouldn't even touch Lacey's stomach. Yeah. Wow. So a lot of indicators that there were significant issues in this marriage. Now, Lacey goes out, and it's said that she went on a walk the morning of December 24th, 2002. She is up in the morning. She's on the computer. This is all alleged by Scott. She is making some cookies. She's watching Martha Stewart. She's mopping the floor, even though the housekeeper had come the day before. And she takes the dog for a walk. Now, Scott had just bought a boat, and he wanted to put the boat in the water. So instead of driving 20 minutes to put the boat in the water, Scott decides to drive to the San Francisco Marina or Berkeley Marina and drop the boat there, which is an hour and a half from Modesto. So he decides he's going to go fishing, in air quotes, for the day and drives up there. When he returns at I think it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he sees their dog, Mackenzie. Mackenzie has a leash on, and Lacey is nowhere to be found. So he does what every worried husband does. He immediately takes his clothes off and washes them. He takes a shower. He eats pizza with milk, which someone on TikTok said, that's the weirdest part of this whole story. And I thought, that's pretty strange. But he has this leisurely meal, and then he decides to call Lacey's parents and say, "Is Lacey with you? Because she's not here." And then he immediately says, "Lacey is missing." And that was an indicator to Lacey's mother of something very strange, that he would immediately think that something terrible had happened to Lacey. So he calls Lacey's friends. Lacey's stepfather calls the authorities, the police. The police respond within 13 minutes, and they begin to look for Lacey. It is a very small community, as I know it, or at least it's explained in some of the coverage, Modesto. So there were hundreds of people that were coming together over the holidays and looking for Lacey, making posters. They set up sort of a home base at the Red Lion Hotel. And from there, they were going out and searching the park where she had gone for her walk, the neighborhood. And then, of course, they searched up in and around the bay. Now, something important to know is that they took dogs out that found the scent of Lacey at the home and then trailing off. And then they also found the scent of Lacey in the bay. So whatever happened to Lacey happened within those couple of days of December 24th, December 25th.
So the dogs actually reinforced the notion that this is exactly what happened.
Exactly. And I bring that up because, and I'll get into it in a second, but some of the evidence that the Los Angeles Innocence Project and Scott's family suggests is that Lacey was kidnapped by some burglars who burglarized a house across the street. But it's then they would have had to drive an hour and a half to dump the body. It's all just ridiculous. So Scott, now, he won't let any of his pictures with Lacey go up. He refuses to do any media that shows his face. He's sort of lackluster in his commitment to finding Lacey. They wanted to search the house. He asked the police, he said, am I really going to sign this agreement for you to search the house without a lawyer? And then he said to the head detective, where is the trust? And they were like, you know, if you were innocent, you would let us search this house. Like, she could have had a stalker online. Something could have happened.
It works both ways. I have nothing to hide. I trust you guys. Go ahead.
Exactly. So, so everyone's really suspicious of Scott. And then on December 30th, 2002, a woman comes forward, and her name is Amber Fry, and she is, in fact, Scott Peterson's girlfriend. So they had met November 20th of 2002. They had a whirlwind romance where 2 weeks into the meeting, Scott's picking her daughter up from school and has a key to her house. And he, in fact, joined her for this Christmas party, which is sort of this infamous picture on the right, if you're watching. But he had told Amber he was not married, he did not have kids, and had led her to believe that he wanted to create a life with her. He, in fact, said, your daughter, Ayanna, is enough for me. I don't need any more kids.
Wow.
So she comes forward on December 30th and calls the Modesto police, tells them that she's been in this relationship with Scott. Scott does not know that she came forward. And through friends, she discovers that, in fact, her boyfriend, again in air quotes, is a suspect in the case of his missing wife, or at least he's a person of interest, I should say. So they, I don't know what you would call it, like they bug her phone and they start to record her conversations with Scott.
The authorities do.
The authorities
They tap her phone.
They tap her phone because they want to record her conversations with Scott. Of course, they're hoping that Scott will admit to the crime, but it is really Amber's testimony that puts Scott, the jury finds him guilty. And in fact, in the documentary by Netflix, they have Juror 1 and Juror 4 come in and talk about it. And they thought he was guilty because there was no forensic evidence connecting him with Lacey, with Lacey's body. There was no DNA. But Amber Fry's testimony is what convinced them that he was guilty.
Wow.
Now, if you go up, sorry, Tony, there's a picture of the candlelight vigil. This happens on New Year's Eve, and it's actually a really important part of the story with Amber because Scott is calling Amber from this candlelight vigil. He is calling his girlfriend from the candlelight vigil for his wife, who is missing, to tell her that he is in Paris at the Eiffel Tower. I mean, the fabrication and the lies and the network of misinformation and you know, just the whole thing that he had fabricated for Amber was absolutely ridiculous and so incriminating. But in fact, that call was one of the most important calls.
That's what did it for me. That's what did it for me when I found out that he was calling his mistress from his wife's candlelight vigil and the things he was saying. And at one point he said, he was on the phone with her. He said, "You don't."
Oh, she dropped out. Kim dropped out. What was he saying on the phone? She was just talking about that.
Well, there was a lot. I'm curious to see what she was going to say.
Go ahead. What was he saying on the phone?
At one point, he was saying to her, "Oh, this is about my first holidays. I had lost my wife." Right? Yeah. Like as if she died way back when, or, you know, before they started dating, and not that she's currently missing. It's wild.
Yeah. Wow. So eventually Amber has to come forward because the press starts to hear rumors about a girlfriend. And so she holds a press conference. And it is then, too, when Lacey's family is like, yeah, he's guilty. So, so there's still no bodies. Now, if you go down, Tony, there's actually a visual of Connor's nursery. And very early on in Connor and Lacey being missing, he turns Connor's nursery into a storage room. That's not what you do when you're anticipating the return of your wife and unborn son.
He is cold.
All evidence. Yeah, he actually turned in Lacey's car on February 4th of 2003 and bought himself a truck.
He is cold.
The authorities had trackers on his 2 trucks, and that becomes important a little bit later. So he's still calling Amber. Eventually, Amber stops communication with him. And it is on April 13th of 2003 that little Connor's body washes ashore in the San Francisco Bay.
Wow.
Yeah, or Berkeley Bay. I get confused because I'm not as familiar with that area, but
yeah, it's the San Pablo Bay. I believe it's the Berkeley Marina where the remains washed ashore. Yeah,
I love that Kim knows his story so well.
So
what was that like the day that the body washed up? That had to be a huge day, right, Kim?
Well, there was the search for her was unbelievable. I mean, it was daily news. There were reporters camped out outside of the home on the street every morning. The top story was, "Is she found yet? Where is she? What's happening now?" So when the remains washed ashore, I think people were surprised that it was in the Bay Area, and it was a huge story. I mean, there were cameras from every single network. You know what, like a major story where all the live trucks from everywhere, it was a national story. So really, really sad. And I think everyone just felt dejected. You kind of knew that it was going to end up in a bad way, but you kind of held out hope until that moment. So everyone that had been so invested in the story and, her beautiful smile and her pregnancy, she was 8 months pregnant at the time. People just were holding out this hope, and it was just a day of sadness.
No.
Yeah. And so exactly. And so Connor's body is found on April 13th, and then Lacey's body washes ashore on April 14th. They're about a mile apart, but still in that San Francisco Bay, Berkeley Marina area. And so with the bodies being found, it took them a couple days to do a DNA test, but they arrested Scott. And Scott was in San Diego. That's where his family was from. And I bring up the trucks earlier because Scott was in a new used Mercedes-Benz that he bought with his mother's money under his mother's name because they knew he was being tracked in the trucks. And so the police go on a chase and arrest him, and they drive him back up to Modesto. Now, in the car, he asks them, were the bodies, Lacey and Connor? Of course, he knew they were. And the police, in fact, said, yes, we've confirmed that the bodies were Lacey and Connor. And as they're driving up to Modesto, which is 7 hours, 8 hours, they stop for food. And Scott orders this huge In-N-Out order. And that was also assigned to the police.
My God,
you've just found out the bodies of your family have washed ashore, and you still have a rather large appetite. All of these things are circumstantial, but they are all evidence of a man that just did not care. If you go to the visuals, Tony, and if you're watching, within the car, they found basically a survival kit. I mean, it's insane. They found $15,000 in cash, which his mother had given him. This is how he was arrested. His
mother really backed him up a lot. Gave him the money for the Mercedes and $15,000 in cash.
His parents paid Mark Garagos $1 million to defend him.
And so he's from this wealthy family?
He's from a wealthy family.
Jeez, man.
So he had dyed his hair and his goatee orange, yellow. He had claimed that it had turned that in the pool or in the sun, but he had in fact gone to a hair salon and dyed it. There's the $15,000 cash. And we can just go through the other visuals. I mean, it's insane. There's snorkel equipment. There's knives.
Oh, my God.
There's 4 cell phones. He had stolen credit cards from some of the family members. He also had his brother's ID, which he looked like his brother. So, of course, the assumption is that he was going to go and flee to Mexico with the cash, with the cards, and then with the fake ID. Yeah, I know. The snorkel equipment it's all just ridiculous.
Gosh.
And it's so hard to look at that. I still question why people would even think that this man was innocent, but some people do.
Oh, somebody actually rated his booking photo, which we do on this show.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't. We only do it in Florida, but they gave him a 9.5. He's a handsome guy.
Is that out of 10?
Yeah, yes, out of 10. There he is.
Out of 100.
He looks better alongside his $15,000 cash that his mom got him.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so crazy. How do you how do you convince someone that an innocent man changes his physical appearance, steals credit cards, has a fake ID, has a car that his mom has bought him, and he also was carrying pesos as well. So
I'll tell you what, why can't I have a family like that? I don't remember my I have a good family. I love my family. But they're not that kind of. They don't step up like that.
No. They're
Anyway,
not,
go ahead.
So he's arrested. He is taken
Charged with murder.
Charged with murder. First degree for Lacey, second degree for Connor. And the case starts. He hires Mark Garagos, as I mentioned. So his parents paid $1 million for his defense.
A famous attorney.
Yes.
Right.
And then Amber Heard
They're on the right.
retains Gloria Allred.
Gloria Allred. Right.
And so Gloria Allred does her case pro bono. But it is, in fact, Amber's recorded conversations and her testimony.
Not Amber Heard.
Not Amber Heard. Amber Fry. That really convinces the jury of his guilt, in addition to all the strange behavior that we've been talking about. If you go down, there's one more visual for this. A big point in the defense was that the boat was really small, so it wouldn't have been able to hold Lacey's weight and his weight. But in fact, they did. What is that when they put a woman of the same size as Lacey into the boat to demonstrate that could in fact have happened.
Okay.
He bought 90 pounds of concrete, and they only found 8 pounds, meaning he had made all of these different anchors to sink the body. But he couldn't justify where 82 pounds of concrete had gone, or 80 pounds of concrete. So that, in fact, went to different homemade anchors that he had created to sink the body. So he is found guilty, and he is sentenced to death. I'm told in my research just how heartbreaking and how much people remember the testimony from Lacey's mom in the sentencing. So he's sentenced to death. Scott's sentenced to death. He's taken to San Quentin. And then some of the issues come. I guess when you are sentenced to death, there's an automatic appeal.
Right.
And so he has been appealing since his death sentence. There were some issues with the jurors. Some jurors lied on their questionnaires, and so that became an issue. And in fact, they resentenced him because of that, from death to life without parole. And then he had been writing to this organization called the Los Angeles Innocence Project, and they have decided to take on his case. Now, quickly, they are saying that a burglary that happened across the street from Scott Peterson's home anywhere between the 24th and the 26th, but they're assuming it's around the 24th, because as of the 25th, there was a lot of press and media and people at Lacey's house. So they're saying the burglary had to happen before that. Mm-hmm. But that burglary across the street, Scott's defense is trying to say that the burglars of that house took Lacey, and they were the ones that killed her. And they're using...
There's no evidence of that or anything. It's just
no,
weird.
Just eyewitness testimony. But people get it wrong all the time. There were 11,000 tips initially around this case. I mean, people think that they see things, and they want to believe that. So they're using eyewitness testimony, the burglary of the house across the street, and then there was an orange van that was found nearby. And that orange van was someone put it on fire. Someone, tried to destroy the van. And within that van was a mattress, and that mattress has blood on it. So they're petitioning to test the mattress that is inside this van to see if it's Lacey's DNA. So,
gosh.
Lacey's blood, yeah. And then earlier, there were some visuals of just like who the burglars were and a timeline. I mean, again, the mail delivery person said that they came just after 10 a.m. and there was no dog barking, and the dog used to always bark. Now, the dog could have been running around, but then the neighbor found the dog and brought it back. So there's issues with the timeline, but certainly Scott Peterson killed Lacey Peterson. There is no question about that. So we'll see what comes. If for anybody that's interested, the Peacock special debuts tomorrow, August 20th, and that is an interview with Scott from prison.
But the Netflix series is on now.
The Netflix series is on now. So If you have a Netflix subscription and you're interested, it's a 3 or 4 part series. It's really interesting, and I thought it was well done. So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a horrible story. I have to say I was really emotional listening to it. Her mother has a very large role in this Netflix series, and you can feel her pain. You can see it, you can feel it, you can hear it. It is tangible. And you know that, yeah.
The mother, I remember the video very well, came out during Lacey's disappearance before the remains had washed ashore in Berkeley and said, we don't think Scott did this. She was asked at a press conference, and Lacey Peterson's family, including her mother, were supportive of him.
Yes.
They didn't believe. She said, we can't believe that he would do this. We don't believe that's the case. And then come to find out, after all the trust they put in him, that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah. Mothers can really overlook a lot of stuff, I find. Like, those terrorists, like the 9/11 terrorists, you heard of, no, not my son. No, not my son. They'd never, actually, it was your son, and we've got video and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes to show how he really duped everyone around him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he's charming and handsome and wealthy and all those things that, matter. But the weird thing was the way the family overlooked all the evidence. It's just pretty...
And Jackie, who is Scott's mother, had the audacity to write to Lacey's mother and ask her to delay the services, the funeral for Lacey and Connor. So, quote, once Scott is exonerated, we can all join you. It's what are you talking about? She also refused Lacey's mother's access to their home because Scott still was the person that owned the home, and Jackie was given sort of the oversight of the home. She would not let Lacey's family come in and grab Lacey's belongings. And that was just to further hurt them because they believe that Scott was guilty. It's just awful. It's awful what Scott's family did.
The last thing I'll just ask you is, again, the Innocence Project, you associate them with sort of a righteous battle, like taking DNA, in cold cases and all these things that, somehow right or wrong. And clearly, in this case, they've taken a situation in which all the evidence points to this guy. There's really no question at all about it. And they've taken up this case. What do the documentarians and others who they spoke to say about that?
Well, you make a really great point, which is there is the Innocence Project, which is a 501c3 organization that works to exonerate
That's Barry Scheck, I think, is involved in that. Yeah.
And then there is the Los Angeles Innocence Project,
which is
does not look like it's a 501c3.
How big a check do you have?
Yeah, they are not. And the Innocence Project, of course, went to social media and said, "We are not doing this. We are not relitigating this. We're not investigating this. Go to the Los Angeles Innocence Project."
There it is. Red P says it's not the same Innocence Project, Mark. Completely different organization than the IP. Yeah. Wow.
But you're right. A lot of people are confusing them. I don't know very much. I tried to do some research on the Los Angeles Innocence Project, but there's not a lot of information there. As I mentioned before, Scott is the one that reached out to them. He continued to reach out to them, and then they decided to take on this case.
Very troubling, interesting to hear from you who follow this stuff that you so much like the Netflix series, so you'd recommend it.
Yes, I would recommend it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's 4 parts? How many parts?
It's 3 or 4 parts.
Okay.
And I don't know much about Peacock. I will say that all of the true crime community and influencers that I follow and engage with have gone to social and warned people about this Peacock special because it is an interview with Scott. So you can
so you're
imagine.
hearing his side, and it plays to him even more.
There's a lot of forensic psychologists that have looked at his interview with Diane Sawyer and just ripped it apart because of his subconscious behavioral patterns and things that he does with his speech and his breathing and his eyes that indicate, his guilt.
Wayne the Sane says the mother likely created this narcissist. There's the face-to-face with Peterson that was advertised. Yeah. The family still has a lot of dough, is the question John asks.
I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah. I know that his mother passed away, Jackie. I know that they had $1 million to spend on the
Passed
defense.
away before he could be exonerated, huh? Sad. Courtney, thank you. You have done it again. A nice job.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming through. That is True Crime Corner for today.
True Crime Corner, only on the Mark Thompson Show.
Wow. That's a tough one, huh?
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, we are finishing up around here. You can probably, I I don't mean this in a disparaging way, Tony, but you can probably lose Courtney's avatar right now. We're down to just two, Kim and myself. And I'm very excited to catch up with any handled business.
Kim, how are you?
Let me just see quickly. No Contendo says these are loose ends that we're kind of getting to, and I'll have one important loose end for you in a moment. But first, these.
Big shout out.
No Contendo, who's a regular super chatter for a couple of bucks, says Proud Boys legal fees weren't covered by 45. Yeah, how about that? So that's another thing we were talking about when it comes to domestic unrest and I'm talking about violence within the country that might follow or be concurrent with and it's part of the plan, at least expressed in some circles, around the election. I was saying that I didn't see like an all-out civil war situation. I hate to use that term even, but because I just see the effects and the repercussions from the last confrontation with law enforcement around J6 being so problematic for those arrested and hunted down by the Justice Department. So, and to that point, the promised legal fees that were supposed to be paid by 45 were not. Biden needs to make sure everyone knows that the Afghan withdrawal was Trump's plan, not his. It is interesting, Guitar Dog, thank you for that. It is interesting to me that when talking about Afghanistan, that they think is a big gotcha on Biden, and there was a definite awful quality to the withdrawal from Afghanistan, but I do give him credit for getting out of Afghanistan. Still, that said, I would have liked to see Bagram Air Force Base continue. It should have been there. To close Bagram, I didn't understand that. To the point, it's such a weird one that I'd like to know more on that. I've looked for more and I can't find more. One of the key things, and this speaks to Guitar Dog and his comment, is that Trump made the deal with the Taliban and gave them a specific pullout date. We got an extension on the pullout date, but this guy, Trump, who talks so much, you'll recall, about never wanting to let your enemy or your adversary know when you're finishing a combat operation because that only tips the hat. He actually did just that. He agreed to a withdrawal date, and that created huge problems for Biden. So I think you're right, Guitar Dog. I don't hear a lot of back play on that, but hopefully we will now that you've got somebody involved in the back and forth, at least on the presidential candidate level, and Kamala Harris, who can definitely handle that. You must be doing something right, Mark, if the Trumpies are on here attacking you. Bravo. Yeah, love the Trumpies. I don't mind the Trumpies. I really don't. In fact, I think it kind of stirs the pot and makes for an interesting discussion. I just like it when it's a substantive point as opposed to just like name calling or something like that. Have you thought of a sweater vest, Mark? This is from VG. Mark, it's Mr. Blackwell from the grave. Have you thought of a sweater vest? Try a new jacket is what he's saying. All right, thank you,
I love the
George.
jacket. It looks nice.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah. And finally, No Contendo. This show is brought to you today by No Contendo.
Big shout out.
Airline, cruise ship, and oil gas industry all got bailouts under Trump. Post-COVID, they raised rates, and we're wrong for asking for price controls. I feel like we read that before, but again, that does speak to the double standard. There's always a socialized version of what we do with big corporations, bailing them out, and then they scream about socialism when we want to get a handout or help in any way, a soft landing for the little guy. Cheryl says, Randy, I personally think Kamala, this must be in response to Randy, personally think Kamala Harris bringing price gouging into play is smart since everyone seems to be crazy over prices. It really doesn't need to be analyzed in detail. That's what I was saying at the beginning of the show. Cheryl is exactly right. Keeping it general, mentioning price gouging, I think is a smart thing. I think it's politically smart, and also it speaks to, without getting into a lot of details, the general sense we have that we're getting ripped off in America, because we are. This from Sadness says, Alien was 1979. Okay, good one on that. Is Albert still around? Asked Mars.
Albert, thank you.
Albert is on vacation. He will be here.
Better be.
Yeah, when is he coming back? This week, right? Yeah,
he's back to normal day, so he's back Wednesday.
He sent us pictures we haven't been able to show yet, but
we haven't been able to show pictures, and the other thing I wanted to do today is I wanted to recognize the loss of some very high-profile people. You know, Phil Donahue died.
Yeah.
And I had some people who you might not even recognize who died. But Phil Donahue, the songwriter for Young Girl and Traveling Man, passes away. A guy named Jerry Fuller. Charlie Moss died. You know who Charlie Moss is? I didn't know his name, but I know his ad. He created there's Phil Donahue.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about these people maybe tomorrow. Phil Donahue, revolutionized the talk show, kind of pre-Oprah, came out of Chicago just like Oprah. Charlie Moss created I Love New York. Remember that campaign? I Love New York? Yeah. He did that. He's a pioneer on Madison Avenue. And he did one other huge campaign, the Alka-Seltzer campaign, Plop, Plop, Fizz, Fizz, oh, what a relief it is. That was Charlie Moss also.
Okay.
He just passed away at 85. And I have more I really wanted to share with you. Didn't I mention one to you, Kim, that I wanted to, the guy who wrote Stay.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Oh, he's Maurice Williams.
Okay.
He was a doo-wop singer. He was 86 years old. He wrote Stay and a bunch of other stuff. His music, of course, big hit at the time and also used in Dirty Dancing, which is popularized his stuff. So Luis says $1.99 super chat.
Big shout out.
Gold bars to prison bars. Nice job, Bob Menendez. Yeah, Bob Menendez really knows how to do it. So those are a few of the things I wanted to honestly follow up with today, but we'll get to some of it tomorrow.
The Mark Thompson Show.
We got a little bit behind. What can I tell you? So it's sad when it happens, but it happens. Greg Kihn died. That's right, Greg Kihn. Wow, and Greg Kihn was a Bay Area guy. We got a lot of Bay Area viewers and listeners in California. Isn't that right?
He was on the radio here in the Bay Area, that's right.
Yeah, for a long time. I think his show lasted 14 years or something. Greg Kihn from the Greg Kihn Band. And I'll tell you that a longtime San Francisco comic came to Los Angeles and did things too. He was a good guy. I remember him in the clubs. Perry Kurtz passed away. Perry Kurtz, the victim of a driver who hit him and killed him on Ventura Boulevard. He was 73 years old and he had kids and a wife, and he was a marvelous guy who did like over-the-top kind of quirky stuff on stage, so he will be missed as well. So a lot of sad news. Tomorrow, David K. Johnston joins
I'm
us.
Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Going to be a great show. We'll pick up some loose ends as well.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Yes, we are out of time. All right, Kim continues with the After Party Live. Till tomorrow. Bye-bye.